Today's video is all about filet crochet. So what is filet crochet? Filet crochet is a crochet technique that was used years ago and it's still used today, but primarily it was used in the 18 and 1900s to create images onto a piece of fabric. Filet crochet was done using a very small steel crochet hook and very fine weight yarn or crochet thread. You would create bedspreads and chair backs and table runners, pillow shams. It is basically double crochets and chain stitches. So here is an example of one that I have in my family. It's very old. It was done using crochet thread, and you can tell that there's leaves here, and it's not a perfect square, so my guess is this was like a chair back or something. You can see it's very dirty. I don't even dare put it in the wash because I don't want to ruin it at all, but you can tell that this was made from a graph or an image. I have done one here. It is supposed to be an acorn. You can tell on mine because I used a much thicker weight yarn and a larger size hook. You can tell more those blocks, the double crochets and the chains. But I did create an image and made it into this piece of fabric. Another example, again, that was passed down to me. There's deer, some trees, and they look really pretty. So this one I'm guessing was maybe more of a chair back, but maybe not. I'm sure back in the day they probably mixed and matched their little fabrics all over the place. Filet crochet can be done using any size yarn and any size hook. However, the larger the hook and the yarn weight, the larger the project will be. So today I'm going to show you how to make both of these squares. They're both filet crochet. They're both done with double crochets and chain spaces. This one and this one are the same graph pattern, but the blocks and spaces are reversed. So let me show you what that means. Here is a graph for this one here. So you can see on this square we've got all of these double crochets. The entire border really is double crochets. On the graph, that is represented by these shaded blocks. So I created this graph. I've counted over 7 blocks and up 10 blocks, and then shaded in where I wanted the blocks to be and left the spaces open. So when you see a filet crochet graph, you will notice that some patterns have the space, and a space equals a double crochet, a chain 2, skip 2, and a double crochet in the next stitch. Let's look at the block. The block equals 4 double crochets. So each one of these blocks has 4 stitches in it. There'll be a double crochet on that first stitch, 2 double crochets in the middle, and a double crochet on the end for that first block. That's 4 stitches. When you move to the next block, that stitch that you used for your last stitch on that first block, so 1, 2, 3, 4, is going to also be the first stitch on the next block. So you already have that stitch completed. You would work 2 more stitches and then a third one to create your 4 for that block. So that's where filet crochet is a little bit confusing until you get the hang of it and reading the pattern, and sometimes you can get thrown off very easily if you forget that those end stitches on each block also count as the first stitch in the next block. Same thing when you run into a space. So you would work 4 double crochets for that block. You've already got your 1 double crochet for the next block, so you would work 3 double crochets after that initial 4. So If you're thinking of this in traditional crochet pattern terminology, that would be 7 double crochets that you would have, and then you would chain 2 to get the space and do a double crochet in the next. Now that double crochet that you did to end that space block would then count as a double crochet for your next block. So I can tell that there are 7 blocks here, but I know that each block is 4 double crochets, and each end double crochet counts as the first double crochet in the next block. So I would just write this out as 4 double crochets plus 3, so that's 7, plus 3, which is 10, plus 3, which is 13, plus 3, which is 16, plus 3, which is 19, plus 3, which is 22. So I know I have 22 total stitches for this length here. Going up, you would read the pattern, and I have arrows here. Every odd row you read right to left, and every even row you read left to right. For the next square, we have started with spaces. So you can see I've started with spaces, and I've just reversed that graph. So anything that was shaded up here is a space down here. Again, the same method follows. A space equals a double crochet, chain 2, skip 2, and a double crochet to finish that block, and each block is 4 double crochets. Each block, whether it's a space or a filled in block, has 4 stitches in it. You just have to remember that the stitch on the end counts as the first stitch of the next block. So I kind of like to think of it as you work your 4 here, and then you've got 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. But if you actually look at it, you do have 4. If you're looking at each individual square or block, there are 4 stitches in each. So that is just something to keep in mind as you're looking at a filet crochet graph pattern. Now that we've got the basics down, let's go ahead and recreate these graphs into pieces of fabric like this. The first thing that we need to determine is our foundation chain. So I'm going to start with a slip knot on my hook. So we know that each block is worth 4 stitches. Each of the end stitches counts as the first stitch of the next block. We need to have 22 total stitches running across, and I know with the graph on this it looks like you're going to get a much narrow project and a much taller project. However, it evens out because these blocks on the end or going up, those are double crochets, so they're going to be a little bit taller. And remember that each block is worth 4 stitches. So if you're creating your own graph, always remember that if you do a huge, very wide graph, the project is actually going to be much, much wider because each of those individual blocks are technically 4 stitches. So for the foundation chain, we're going to chain 21 because we already know that we need 22 total stitches. So I'm going to chain 21 plus an additional 3, and that additional 3 will count as our first double crochet or the 22nd chain. 21 chains. I'm going to chain 3 for that last double crochet stitch. So I have a total of 24 chains. And in the 4th stitch away from the hook, so 1, 2, 3, into that 4th stitch, we're going to work our first double crochet. We know that every stitch for row 1, we're working this way. Our chain row started, so we're right here. Working this way, we're going to work a double crochet into each stitch all the way back. We should have 22 total double crochet stitches at the end of row 1. At the end of row 1, we have 22 double crochet stitches. That chain 3 counts as a double crochet stitch. I always like to go back and count to make sure, because this first row sets us up for the rest of the project. Let's look at row 2. Row 2, we're reading left to right. We've got 2 blocks, a space, a block, a space, and 2 blocks. Each shaded block is 4 double crochets, so we're going to work a chain 3 to start, and that counts as a double crochet. So I'm going to chain 3, turn my work. That counts as our first double crochet stitch in that block. I'm going to work a double crochet in the next 3. And that is our first block. So you can see we have the 4 stitches, and they're all double crochet stitches, and that chain 3 counts as a double crochet. If you look on our graph, the next block is also shaded, so we need 4 double crochets to complete that block. But remember that this last double crochet that we did counts as the first double crochet of the next block. So we just need to work 3 double crochets. So a double crochet in the next 3 stitches. And now we have 2 blocks. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a block. Count that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's your second block. We're at a space now. So here is that first double crochet of our space. So remember, a space is a double crochet, chain 2, skip 2, and into the next work a double crochet. One stitch, 2 stitch, 3 stitch, 4 stitch. Let's look at our graph. We need a block and then another space. So remember, this last double crochet counts as the first double crochet of the next square. So there's 1 double crochet, 2, 3, and 4. We need a space, so remember that last double crochet counts as the first double crochet in your space. Chain 2, skip 2, and a double crochet into the next. Skip 2, double crochet in the next. We need to finish off with 2 blocks. So we're just going to double crochet in the last 7 stitches. Don't forget to crochet into the top of that turning chain, because that always counts as a stitch and a double crochet. And that is row 2. So you can see we've created that all double crochet row, and then those 2 spaces we now have on our fabric. For row 3, we're going to be reading right to left. We need a block, space, block, space, block, space, block. So we always start with a chain 3, turn, that counts as our first double crochet. So we're working a block, so I'm going to work 3 more double crochets. 1, 2, 3. There's our 4 stitches. We are now working a space, so we have our first stitch of the space. We're going to chain 2, skip 2, 1, 2, and put a double crochet in the next stitch. So just put a double crochet on the top of that. We've got a space. We are now working a block. So I've got my first double crochet of that block. I'm going to work a double crochet into the actual stitches, or those chains that we did. So there's one, find the next one. Sometimes those are a little bit tricky, but try to work into the actual stitch. You don't want to just work into the space. And then a double crochet to finish. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can kind of see how that works, and that's how the whole pattern is going to work when you're reading from a filet crochet graph. You're just going to work 4 double crochets for each shaded block, and a space gets a double crochet, chain 2, skip 2, and a double crochet on the end. The hardest part about filet crochet is remembering that each block shares a stitch. Let's take a look at working up a filet crochet graph starting with spaces. To start a graph where you're starting with spaces and not blocks, the foundation chain, and this is the hardest part, and it takes trial and error in practice and counting over and over to get the right foundation chain. At least for me, I'm not very good at math, so I kind of have to do it a few times until it works out. Filet crochet patterns should give you the foundation chain number that you need to create that graph pattern. But if they don't, you may have to kind of figure it out yourself. So we already know that we need 22 stitches running across the bottom for our graph. When you're doing a graph pattern that starts with the spaces, you want to chain the number that is one less than the total number of stitches that you need. So just like in this one, we chained 21, added 3 for that double crochet, and then just double crocheted in the 4th chain from the hook and every chain back, and we had 22 stitches because that is what we need to complete this graph. Same thing on here. We're going to chain 21, but because we need a double crochet and then 2 chains to create that space before we work our first double crochet, we're going to chain an additional 5. So when you're working the graph that starts with a space, chain the number that is one less of the total number of stitches that you need, plus 5. So in our case here, that is going to be 26 total stitches, and then we will work a double crochet back into the 8th stitch or chain away from the hook. So let's chain our 21 and then we'll work back from there. I have my 21 stitches. I'm going to chain 5 extra. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I'm going to work a double crochet back into the 8th chain away from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Work a double crochet into that 8th chain away from the hook. And now we've got our 2 chains here. We've got our double crochet here, that chain 3 here, and we've created a little bit of a space. We're going to chain 2, skip 2, 1, 2, and a double crochet in the next. So what we're really kind of doing is working a mesh stitch. Chain 2, skip 2, double crochet in the next. So you would do this all the way back, ending with a double crochet in the very last chain. So you can see I've worked all of those spaces. We've got our chains in between the double crochets. So I should have a total of 22 stitches. So 2 chains. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and the top of that turning chain 22. Let's look at row 2. Row 2, again we're reading left to right. We've got 2 spaces a block, a space, a block, and ending with 2 spaces. When you are starting with a space, you want to chain 5 to start. So 3 for the double crochet on the end, and then 2 more, so total of 5. Those 2 count as the 2 chains in between, and you're just going to work a double crochet in the top of that double crochet. So we've created a space. We have our double crochet on the end, that's 1 stitch, 2 chains, skip 2, and double crochet into the next to create a space. We need 1 more space, so chain 2, because this double crochet counts as the first stitch in the next square. Chain 2 for our space and double crochet, skip those 2, double crochet in the next stitch, which happens to be over that double crochet here. I've created 2 spaces now. We now work a block, so there is stitch 1 of our block. We're going to work a double crochet into those 2 chain spaces. So again, try to get into the actual stitches. And sometimes they can be hard to find. If it doesn't look right, take it out. It looks like I skipped that first chain, so I'm going to just do that again and get into that first chain, double crochet into it. Now I can work into the next chain, a double crochet, so I have 3. I need to work a double crochet into the top of that double crochet to create my block. 4 stitches equals a block. We now need a space, so chain 2, skip 2, so we're going to skip those 2 chains and work a double crochet into the top of that double crochet. There we are. If we look at our graph here, so we've done 2 spaces, a block, a space. We need another block. So we've got the first double crochet of that block. I'm going to work a double crochet into the next 2 stitches. And into the top of that double crochet to create my block, 4 double crochets, and we end with 2 spaces. So again, we've already got that end, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet into the next, chain 2, skip 2, and then work a double crochet in the top of that turning chain. And we have created row 2. You can see on the finished ones that I have here, this is the first one that we did, where we started with all blocks, working spaces in between to create just a random pattern, and then working in the opposite way, where we started with spaces and working the blocks in the middle just randomly. Same pattern essentially, we just reversed where we shaded blocks or where we had spaces. You can always try to create your own graph and your own pattern by just taking some graph paper, or there is a wonderful program on the internet called Stitch Fiddle, and I will link to that site down below if you want to check that out. But you can always just use this graph paper and do it by hand. I recommend playing around with it as far as size goes. You'll really see how much you can change the size and the look of a filet crochet pattern by just changing the yarn weight, the hook size, and things like that. It is really amazing what just a little tweak of a tool or yarn will do for the overall look of a project. I hope this video was helpful. I plan to do a lot more filet crochet tutorials and patterns in the future, so I thought it would be helpful to do sort of an overall video on what filet crochet is and how to read the graph and how to put the graph into a piece of fabric like this. So again, I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!